Oh well, I was gonna wait till February first and drop the video and everything, but I think I'm gonna drop it now. Okay, here's the name of the title. CNN tries to cut the feed after a story slavery truth bomb drops live on air. This is gonna shake some people's heads. This is gonna get some people riled up. I know it's gonna get some people in their feelings, but I just don't fucking care, bitches. Here we go.
The modern political and media landscape, the more that I'm convinced that we are a nation run by adult children who don't have the capacity to reason or to admit that they're wrong or to have accountability for anything that they've done or said. Instead, when things don't go their way, they literally behave the way that my toddlers do. They shriek and throw a temper tantrum. This is one of the more famous ones that's been thrown. This was President. You want to find conservatives doing this, and obviously I've been wrong about plenty of stuff. I often and regularly admit it here. I get dragged on the internet every freaking day. It's just the rule of the road, right? But these libs have it so built into their cotton candy, Fabergé egg, fragile ecosystem and worldview that they are perpetually right and morally indignant to anyone who tells them otherwise, that when they are presented with facts they don't like, they just shriek, they just scream. You've seen it before. There are 100,000 videos on the internet of a lib encountering something they don't like. That's probably true, but it goes against their ideology, and they'll literally just scream. They'll sit down on the road and shake. They can't handle it. They're not real people. They're certainly not adults. They're just little children. And this was perfectly encapsulated in a recent CNN interview that went horribly right or horribly wrong, depending on which perspective you are taking. It's an interview that aired last night, featuring generic, bony, Skeletor, heroin chic lib, their hair falling out and her skin falling off, a panel of these people versus Jillian Michaels. Jillian Michaels is fantastic, and it's just a great and strong voice for reason, frankly. I'm not sure she'd consider herself a Republican, but just for rationality. Jillian Michaels' major claim to fame in recent years has obviously been fighting in favor of women's sports and making sure that men cannot compete against women in women's sports, right? Jillian Michaels said something remarkable last night on CNN. Jillian Michaels said that slavery is not a race thing. That all peoples have been slaves at one time or another, and that slavery actually originated in Africa. And for thousands of years, before any white people had slaves, or at least in the way that we understand it in a modern sense, that slave was a racial thing, that black people had slaves, and the whole of Africa originated slavery and exported it, actually, to America, wherein very quickly America and the British Empire outlawed slavery and fought wars to end it. It's a immoral, humane practice, and that America should be applauded for that. And she dared say this live on CNN, and she was met with shrieks and screams. And I'll explain why in a second. First, here's the clip.
Smithsonian, he's effectively now has some random person deciding what is appropriate for the Smithsonian to teach in terms of American history, things that don't offend parts of the MAGA base, right? So we're now literally reviewing parts of American history and parts of American culture to make sure it comports with Dear Leader and what the MAGA
Can we
organization
address
wants.
some of those things that are in there? Because have you looked at some of the things that are being reviewed?
Slavery was a bad thing that was to talk about.
Okay.
Like, he forgives
He's
me for
not
saying
whitewashing slavery. So
he's not?
He's not. No.
Okay.
He's not. And you cannot tie imperialism and racism and slavery to just one race, which is pretty much what every single exhibit does. But let's talk about the fact that when you
Let's talk about the fact
slavery in America was.
Slavery in America was.
Do you realize that only less than 2% of white Americans owned slaves.
But it was a system of white
Do
supremacy.
you realize that
African
slavery
Americans
is
were
thousands
slaves
of
and
years old?
White people were
Do you know
the slave
who
owners.
was the first race
I
to
didn't
try to
realize this was
end
controversial.
slavery?
Wait a second.
Well,
I'm
what's
sorry, Jillian,
controversial?
I'm very surprised
This is
that
an
you're trying
extraordinary
to
exercise in historical revisionism.
I'm really
Historical
surprised.
revisionism. Do you realize that?
Jillian, I'm surprised that you're trying to litigate who was the beneficiary of slavery and
I'm
who
not.
was not.
What I'm trying.
Well, for thousands and thousands of years, it was Africans who were the beneficiary of slavery.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you think sold the slaves? I know this must be an uncomfortable question for many people to ask, but let's ask it, shall we? Let's go. Here's the AI response to how long has slavery existed in Africa? Slavery existed in Africa for over 5,000 years. The earliest documented evidence appearing in ancient civilizations 3,000 years before Christ, where captives were from wars and labor and domestic service and other forms of servitude. While forms of coerced labor were likely predated even written records in various African societies, historical accounts confirm its presence across the continent in diverse systems, including debt bondage, chattel slavery, and military enslavement. These practices evolved through internal African dynamics, external trades, and later intensification. Now, the external trades, as you will find out from any historical record, was done by African tribes.
Mm-hmm.
So it was the African tribes selling enslaved Africans. I'm not arguing that. I'm arguing slavery is immoral. Slavery is immoral, whoever is doing it. Sometimes there are white slaves. Sometimes there are black slaves. Sometimes there are Chinese slaves. Whatever. What I'm saying here is to sit there and pin slavery on a single race, which is, by the way, the holiest of holies. It is the cornerstone of the race Marxist. That's why they're screaming at Jillian. They're screaming at Jillian because Jillian just said something that is empirically true. That slavery is not a race issue. You'd be hard-pressed to go through, the term slave means Slav, Slavic people, white people. That's where the English term slave comes from, because Slavic people were the first slaves that were encountered in the Western Hemisphere. There's a long history of Slavic people being slaves or indentured servants throughout the West. It's like the epistemology of the actual word itself tells you that virtually every race has been a slave of some other race at some time or another. There's so many historic records of this, it's too numerous to count. If you're somebody who's religious, you should go read the Bible, and there's so many accounts of slavery throughout the entire Bible and the scriptures. It's hard to really enumerate all of them. But that's what this says. It says that the abolition of slavery came first from England and then from America. So actually, if there's anyone who deserves to have, and here's the timeline of slavery in Africa, in case you wish to argue with any of these points, the vast majority of the timeline of slavery rooted in Africa that traces back millennia are well before the existence of America. Well before the existence of the Western discoveries of the Americas. In case you're sitting there trying to blame white people or America on slavery. The other thing that I think is particularly shocking about all of this is that slavery exists in Africa today. 7 million African slaves.
Shocker, ain't it? Oh no, he's lying. Shocker, huh, motherfuckers? 200 fucking years, whites were being blamed for slavery. Well. Hey there. There you go. Almost that many millennia. For 12 to 15 millennia, African forces taken to America. That's not right. Right here, you see here, and it's showing that a lot of free slaves had slaves of their own. What? I'll read that again. Free slaves had slaves of their own, and it still has slaves in Africa to this fucking day. I think we should give reparation back. We keep watching, shall we?
On the continent of Africa today. Weird how you never hear that. That's never part of the conversation.
Nope.
So Jillian is 100% right here, and the race Marxists
3000 BC.
who have to have the low IQ, smooth-brained population of this country assume that only white people ever held slaves, that it was only ever a race thing, it wasn't, and that it all originated in America because of our evils. It didn't. It originated in Africa. It was actually exported. The practice was exported to America from Africa. It's bad. I'm arguing against it. And I'm saying that America and England should actually be held up as the pinnacle of ending slavery, the best nations to ever do it. But of course they're not, because, well, power. You can see it here in you can see it here in the expression. Huh? Isn't that perfect? They need power. They need people to be splintered and to assume that America's evil, and the only way to right that evil is to give Democrats power. Or all over lies like this. And this is why it's so important to tell the truth about American history. Which is that America, the truth about American history is that America, more than any nation on earth, I think, yes, for sure, more than any nation on earth, gave up and sacrificed more than any nation on earth to end slavery, not the other way around. America did a penance for slavery and ended it in a way that caused more bloodshed and more pain and more sacrifice and visited more horrors upon the peoples of this land than any other nation on earth. And America is to forever be commended for the sacrifices we made to end slavery. But there are many people who wish to keep it alive today, like here on the CNN panel.
In the context of American history, what are you saying is incorrect by saying that it was white people oppressing black people?
Every single thing is like, oh, no, this is all because white people bad. And that's just not the truth. Like, for example, every single exhibit, I have a list of every single one. Like, people migrated from Cuba because white people bad. Not because of past. Yes, no, it's in there. That's what I'm saying. You don't actually know what's in there. Do you know that when you walk in the front door, the first thing you see is the gay flag?
Jillian, you have a lot of stuff in front of you.
Yeah, I do, because here's the thing.
Are you talking about?
Okay, I'll give you an example.
Yeah, please.
There's one called Change Your Game, right? This has been an installation there. Is gender testing fair in sports? Does that, and then it goes on to talk about how it's complex to do gender testing in sports. It's not complex. It's basic science. That's untrue. It's XX chromosome, XY chromosome. That's sports. Is it fair to have biological men competing against biological women in sports? No. But why is this in the Smithsonian? So it's been completely captured.
First of all, I don't.
And it's totally partisan.
First of all, we don't have time to litigate all of this.
Of course we don't, because then you're going to lose the argument. And everything is racialized, just like you're trying to do to me now.
Excuse me.
It's like, I can't believe you're trying to suggest, that slavery
just to
is
be
a good
clear, you brought up race.
No,
this was a conversation about the arts, and you brought up race.
It isn't.
You brought up.
But the whole point of this is that the issue
you brought up slavery, and you brought up the question of whether. You brought up the question of whether or not slavery in the United States is about race. The answer is yes.
I did not
in the United States.
Don't straw man my argument, because that's not what I said.
So what are you
brought
talking
up
about?
Slavery, and what I was talking about is that this isn't really about that. When you make every single exhibit about white imperialism when it isn't relevant at all, that is a problem. So when you're talking about Cubans leaving Cuba and you make it about white people bad, that's not accurate.
Can I just say something?
That's my point.
So Jillian Michaels went and followed that up by saying, okay, for anybody watching me on CNN, battling it out on Albie Phillips. So this is the Smithsonian exhibit that I was referencing. Trump's not trying to erase slavery by suggesting some of the installations here are inaccurate and biased. Notice how you miss the central fact that Cubans fled Castro's communist regime instead of framing this solely as a U.S. support of dictators, a misleading oversimplification. What she points out is here, effectively saying that the Latin American populations fleeing to America during the 1900s was somehow only because of America destabilizing their countries and white people bad, and not at all because of communism. CNN can't let Jillian Michaels talk because she's utterly destroying their narratives. Watch Jillian Michaels talk circles around Abby Phillips and Congressman Richie Torres. Here it is. This exact moment, CNN forever banned Jillian Michaels. Probably. Sadly. Alright. Yeah. For the record, 25% of Southern households owned at least one slave. You should stop the roids. Less than 2% of white Americans own slaves, and believe it or not, American is more than just the South. There's the Midwest, Northwest, Northeast. Pull up a map, $8 on Amazon. You'll see that many white Americans even died fighting to end slavery.
What?
And hold every...
Oh my lord. Only 2% of white Americans own slaves. Believe it or not. America is more than just the South. There's Midwest, Northwest, Northeast. Pull up a map on that and you see it. Many white people even die fighting to end slavery. Do they suck too? You can't even hold white people, past or present, responsible for this evil. Now y'all thinking. Now you get through all the fog. I've been seeing this shit since day one when I was little in school. I remember my teacher, Miss Sampson, sent me to ISS for calling her a liar about this. I called her a liar. Out of 20-something kids, she sent me to ISS for calling her a fucking liar. She was trying to make like white people were the bad guys. We was a crime. We enslaved blacks for no reason. When I asked her to pull up true history, when she went through there and found some article, and I came from ISS 3 days later, she was smiling saying, "You was right, but nobody's gonna believe you." This is why I do videos right here. This is why I do these narratives. This is why I do these videos to expose the truth. Because, believe it or not, Abraham Lincoln freed slaves, but his vice president had him killed. They take power, put slaves back in slavery. If you look at it, all the stuff going around, all this racial tension, all this, falls right back on the Democrat Party. And here you go. Pretending otherwise it isn't true, telling it's gaslighting on a fire, a regular version. There you go. Now listen here, let this sink in. 2% of white Americans ever owned slaves. Believe it or not, America is more than just the South. There's the Midwest, Northwest, East, West, Northeast. Only 2% of whites own slaves. So what happened to the other 99%? 99%. Should be old. I'm off my actually your mouth. And to this day, there's over 700,000 slaves in Africa still. So why are the Black Lives Matter going there to protest and getting them free? Why is Al Sharp, all these other Black Lives racial leaders here ain't doing something about it, huh? Matter of fact, why ain't Obama doing something about it when he was president? He knew about it. I tell you why. They want a certain group of people to become a scapegoat for racial discrimination. For 200-something years, whites were blamed for slavery. When really slavery first started in Africa 3000 BC, before Christ. Shocker, ain't it? Let's get back to this video.
Person, past or present, responsible for evil. Most people, including most white people, are good. Pretending otherwise isn't truth-telling. It's a gasoline fire of racial division. That's right, it's race Marxism, which is what this is. Race Marxism, which is what they've been using higher education and the Smithsonian Institute to push. Schools, CNN flunkies on slavery triggers network-wide meltdown. Jill and Michaels obliterate Democrat because they're trying to blame white people for everything bad in the world. That's exactly right. The entire premise of the left's George Floyd era argument was, in fact, white people bad, a sign of weakness rather than strength. That left-wing CNN panelists are now pretending they never made that argument at all is good. That's right. You might be banned from CNN, we'll see. She took on 5 CNN hosts and came out the winner. Good for you. Jillian Michaels absolutely right. Smithsonian and many institutions have become neo-Marxist propagandists, race Marxists, I call them, who use racism to demoralize us. Stephen Miller, coming in over the top here. The Smithsonian is supposed to be a global symbol of American strength, culture, and prestige, a place that families and children celebrate American history and greatness. Instead, the exhibits have clearly been taken over by left-wing activists who use the Smithsonian, yet another platform, to endlessly bash America and rewrite and erase our magnificent history. These activists have obscenely defaced the beloved institution. The Trump administration will proudly and diligently restore the patriotic glory of America and ensure the Smithsonian is a place that once more inspires love, devotion to this nation, especially among our young citizens. Well done. Well, that is actually the history of slavery around the world and the history of slavery in America. And if you want to scream about it,